Can you see my screen? I'm going to assume yes.
Yep.
So this isn't exactly what the person was working on, but what they wanted to do was have something where they had some content and they had these objects on the screen, and they wanted to show relationships between the objects. So I just created some objects here. We can see. We'll look at this. We'll preview this. And so they had different, there's objects, and some of them had similar features. Like, for example, I want to know, okay, which of the objects are round, so I can click and I can see that relationship between, okay, these are round objects, even though they have other attributes. Which objects are blue, which objects are red, and hopefully I got those all right. And then which ones have thick lines, right? So what he had was a lot of content on the screen, and then there were these interrelationships between the content. So he's trying to figure out how to quickly, or not quickly, but how to build that. And so he started using variables and all these things, and looking at it, realized, well, you don't really need to use that. So I'll show you how to do something like this, and it combines a couple of features, which to me, a lot of times we get questions about advanced e-learning or advanced storyline tips, for example, and people tend to think of things like JavaScript, but I don't think that's advanced. I think knowing JavaScript is an advanced skill, but when you're working in Storyline, if you have something in JavaScript, you're just going to copy and paste the script into the trigger. So you're not doing anything overly complicated on the Storyline side. To me, advanced skills are knowing the features that you have in Storyline, and then knowing how to combine those features to do what you want them to do. So being able to compound features, to me, is the advanced part of the Storyline development. And then, being able to hack a published Storyline file, or being able to use JavaScript, those are advanced skills, but those are skills you have to learn outside of the tools. To be an advanced Storyline developer, I think, is, learning to knowing the features and then learning to combine the features. So let's look at what we're going to do here. I'm going to keep it simple. So we're just looking at just the same objects, and then we'll look at the technique that you have to use, and then you'll see how that works. And I'll show you a couple of tips with that. So basically, I've got these objects here, and let's say when I click on one object, I want to show that there's a relationship between one object to other objects. So what we have to do is we have to have the ability to click on something, and when I click on something, show a relationship, right? So maybe when I click on this first object here, it's somehow related to these three. So I want to show that. And then when I click on this, I want to show that there's a relationship maybe to this one, right? So what's going on? So when I'm clicking, I have to click, and then I have to show. And then when I click on something else, I have to essentially change the state of the objects that I'm showing, change them back, and then I need to make this clickable and then show something or something else. So we're going to change the state of objects, maybe, right? So when I was looking at that, I said, well, the first thing is these are all basically clickable, right? And I need to have an on-off element to that. You can create an on-off element by using a selected state. So for example, let me just insert a different object here just to show the selected state for those who aren't familiar with that. So let's say I have this circle here, and I want to add a selected state. So a selected state's a pre-built state in Storyline, so I don't have to build any triggers. The selected state is already designed to do something. So the selected state is like an on-off switch, so like a light switch. You turn it on, you turn it off. So I'm just going to come over to the states here. I'm going to edit states. I'm going to create a new state, and we're going to call it selected. And so you can see I don't even have to build any triggers, and I'm going to change the state so it looks different. So I'm going to go up here. We'll just make that state orange. So there it is. There's a selected state. Now I don't have to build any triggers because Storyline knows what a selected state is. And a selected state essentially is an on-off type toggle. So I can click it. Now it's selected, and I click it, and it's not selected. Right? So now I have that ability to click something, turn it on, and click it, turn it off. And I can have multiple objects, right? and they can all have selected states. So that part's pretty easy. So you can see, so you can click, and that's what he wanted to do with these. I want to click on something and then show a relationship, right? The problem though is I have to turn off the other ones, right? And so you could use variables to do that, but that gets really complicated. So the easy thing is to just use a button set. So if you select objects on a screen, right, you select them all. If you right click, you have a button set. We'll just say new button set, and I'll just call it circles. And we hit add. So now Storyline created a relationship between those objects and their selected state. So I turn this one on, these are going to be off. I select this one and it deselects the other one. So now I have this relationship. So that's what we're going to do with this here. So when we look at these shapes here, what I have on these is I created a button set for these here. So there's a relationship, so I can only click one on at a time. And then when I go into the selected state, I can edit the selected state and just, highlight those objects. So I'm going to customize the selected state. So basically all I need to do is, it's two things. So I need to create a button set for the things that are clickable, and then the button set, I don't even need to create a selected state, which we'll see here in a second. The button set by itself will create a selected state. Then all I have to do is go into the selected state and figure out what I want to highlight, and I can do that inside the state itself. And then I've got this relationship, because when I select that one object, I can then identify, within the selected state, I could show, whatever it is I want to show, and it makes it really simple. So all I did here in the selected state is I just added rectangles, and then each one, if I go into each one here, each one just has different rectangles that I use to highlight. So it just depends on how you want to highlight it. So pretty simple. So let's just build this from scratch real quick, just to show you how easy it is. I can't remember, I already did all this stuff. So let's just delete this. We'll just use circles just because they look more interesting than text. All right, so we'll say we have 3 objects here, and we'll just, 6 objects, and they're kind of somehow related to each other, right? It really doesn't matter. So the first thing we notice is all the objects just have normal states, which is, the way they are by default. And what I want to do here is I'm going to select them all. So I want to select everything that I want to make clickable, right? And then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to do button set, and I'll just do button set 1. But you can add your own button set if you want to. Just do button set 1. So now what happened was Storyline created a relationship between these and added a selected state. So they each now have a selected state. So when I create that button set, Storyline knows, okay, there's a relationship between these, and they're all selectable, and only one can be selected at a time. The other ones will be off or deselected. So now if we preview this real quick, we have, I don't know if you can see it added a little halo effect there, but you can see I can only select one at a time. So that's pretty simple. So that satisfies the relationship of making things selected and then also turning off the ones that weren't selected. So that's a real quick step. Then all I have to do is go into each object and say, okay, which ones are related to this particular circle? So I'm just going to go inside the selected state here. So just double click. That takes you into the edit mode, and you can tell that right here, right? And then inside the edit mode, I just have to figure out, well, what do I want to make part of the relationship? And let's just say we'll just add arrows real quick just to make it simple. Okay, so we'll just do this, and we'll say, okay, this one and these are related, right, to this particular one. I'm going to copy this arrow, and I'm done with that state, right? So now I'm going to go to the next object, double click, go into the selected state, and let's say this particular one, it's just this one and this one, right? And then you can see how that works. So when I preview this now, and right now I don't see anything, but when I click, I'm going to go into that selected state, and then it's going to show the selected state. These arrows are part of the selected state. And so you can see how that works. So it's a simple way. You know, the person was working with variables and all these other things, and it was really complicated. Just creating a button set and then editing the selected state satisfied that requirement. And then the only other tip I would say, in this case it was simple because arrows are easy, but when I went to go do this one, and I was saying, okay, I want to identify round objects. Well, that's easy, right? So when I go inside the selected state here, oops, when I go inside the selected state, it was easy to see round objects. But because I get this onion skinning effect, I couldn't see the colors. So when I went to go do the one for blue, it's like, well, I couldn't remember which ones were blue. So an easy way to get around that, if you knew you're going to go for blue here, is to just, you know, create your initial shape, right? We'll just keep it this way. Well, I don't want to confuse people. So let's just go ahead and do no outline, no fill, and we'll do a red outline color. So I would do this on the slide here, and then, you know, identify the blue boxes, right? So make those at this place here. This is kind of sloppy. And then I would select all of the boxes here. If I should have made the line thicker because it's easier to select them. All right, so I've got my blue boxes. Then I do Control X, right, or Control C. That puts it on the clipboard. Then I can come into blue, click in here, and then I could paste it in here. So I can't see the colors here, but I can see them on the main screen. So I would do the boxes on the main screen and then copy and paste them over. But the main point is you can use that button set to create that relationship, and that also creates the selected states, and then just go into the selected state. And you really have the full range of the slide to show things, and you're not just limited to that particular button. So you can put things all over the slide. And then, you know, just using those two features, you created, you know, a relatively complex type interaction that without those would have required variables and all of that to make that relationship happen. And that's basically it.
We basically just have a one-word review. Brilliant.
Well, I'll pass that on to the developers because I didn't do anything but show it. So I'll tell the developers that part.
No, that's a fantastic use of button sets.
Yeah, it was. You know, it's when we talk about this all the time. Button sets is one of those things people don't, and even the selected state, right? There's things that, you know, people just don't know because they're not using them, and you know, you don't know it until you see it, right?
Well, and it is. I mean, that's one of those things. You can see where you're doing it manually by having to click something and then show a layer with all those individual shapes, and that gets to be really messy. So in some way, this case, it's one of those, I'd say one of those rare examples where putting all that extra effort into the state probably makes it a lot easier in the long run than having to jump out or show a bunch of different layers or state changes of multiple objects. Because usually we're telling people not to put a ton of stuff inside of states because of the editability, but in this case, it's a far more efficient means than trying to control that many things on the slide or the layers.
Yeah, and I think, you know, probably the only thing you want to consider is if, you know, and this is probably the difference between layers and states, which is a question we get all the time, is if I put this on the layer, which I could, like I can select the blue, you know, the blue button, and then it would show blue layer and then show the same things. The advantage of a layer is if I decide I don't like the buttons here and I want to put them on the bottom, I can move the buttons and these are still going to stay because the layer is going to be static. If I move the button, since it's on the state, all this stuff moves with it. Now I can just go back in the state and put them back into place, but you know, that's one of the advantages of a layer, is the layer is just going to stay there and you can move the buttons around. If I move the buttons around, the states move with the buttons. But this is an easy solution, you know, compared to what the person was doing was a lot more complicated.
Yeah, and just one maybe point of clarification, everything you have there is one big button set. Is that what it is? Everything on the left, where the button, the square. No, the buttons that you have.
Yeah. So these are just a button set. So if I come in here like this right now, this was a duplicate. This has nothing on it, right? These are just regular objects, right? So if I select them all and right click and then I do button set, now they're button set. And so when I did that, you can see Storyline created the selected state. So now there's a relationship between these objects. And it could be anything. I mean, I can select all these things here and right click and make it a button set, right? They don't have to be buttons. I could take characters, pictures, it really doesn't matter, and you select them and create a button set, and then Storyline creates that relationship between those objects and creates a selected state. And so you can, choose characters. It really just depends on, what you want to build.
Can you drag, someone wants to see what you mean by those states are going to move. Can you just maybe drag one of your rectangle buttons to show that how the states do move with it? Yeah,
let's do this. So if I take this button here, right, and you can see on the button set, you can see where the red boxes are, right? If this was a layer, if I click on the layer and it showed the red boxes, the layer's static, it's just going to stay, right? But if I take this button and I move this over here, and now I look at the button set, you can see the shapes moved because the shapes are part of the button. So when I click on the button, the shapes are going to show in that. So when I move the button, the shapes move with the button. If I didn't want them to move, then I would use a layer. The work is basically about the same. It doesn't really, it's just what works best for you. This way you don't have a bunch of layers. It's just right there on the button. But if you're going to move the button, then I would just come into the selected state and I can just move them back into place. That wouldn't even take any that wouldn't take a long time because I can just select them all and then, drag them back up into wherever they needed to go around, right? So it's not hard to edit, but it is just something to keep in mind.
All right. First two tips are pretty awesome. Hopefully I can keep it going with mine, but that's it. I really like that use of button sets on that one. All right. I think it makes more sense. Okay, we're good on those. Anything last you want to show, or are you going to make these source files available too, Tom?
Sure.
Okay.
If you need them, I mean, it just put some shapes on the screen, but I can give them.
Yeah, but your squares and triangles look good.
Some good looking shapes.
Well, symmetrical too, right?
Not really, but all right.
All right.
I'll let you take over there, David.
Yep. All right, cool.